Story 1. In the small, rural town of Millville, nestled among endless rows of cornfields, a sinister secret lay hidden beneath the golden stalks. Millville was a place where everyone knew everyone else, a place where nothing ever seemed to change. But on one fateful summer night, the tranquility of Millville was shattered forever. It was the night of the annual Millville Corn Festival, a cherished tradition that brought the entire community together. Families gathered to celebrate the harvest, children ran through the rows of corn, and the air was filled with laughter and the sweet scent of roasted corn on the cob. The festival had always been a symbol of unity and prosperity for the town. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cornfields, a group of teenagers decided to venture into the sprawling maze of maize. Sarah, the adventurous one of the group, led the way, followed by her friends, Jake, Emily, and Daniel. Armed with flashlights and a sense of excitement, they plunged into the darkness of the cornfield. The rows of corn seemed endless, and the rustling leaves played tricks on their senses. Sarah's flashlight occasionally caught glimpses of scarecrows scattered throughout the field, their ragged clothing and stitched-together faces adding to the eerie atmosphere. The wind whispered secrets among the stalks, and unease settled in their hearts. "These scarecrows give me the creeps." "Come on, Em. It's just a cornfield," Jake replied, trying to sound brave. "What's the worst that could happen?" But Daniel, who had grown up in Millville, knew the stories. He knew that these scarecrows weren't just for show. They were meant to ward off something far more sinister. "They say there's something evil lurking beneath these fields," Daniel whispered. "Something that only comes out at night." Sarah scoffed, dismissing Daniel's superstitions. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "There's nothing out here but corn and scarecrows." As they ventured deeper into the cornfield, the night grew darker and the maze more confusing. They could no longer see the lights from the festival, and their sense of direction began to wane. Panic set in as they realized they were lost in the labyrinth of corn. Hours passed, and exhaustion and fear gnawed at them. Sarah's flashlight began to flicker, and the once jovial group fell into a tense silence. The rustling of the corn leaves grew louder, and it seemed as though the scarecrows were closing in on them. Suddenly, Emily let out a blood-curdling scream. The others turned to see her pointing at one of the scarecrows, its face contorted in a grotesque, menacing grin. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Before they could react, the scarecrow lunged at Emily, its straw-stuffed arms wrapping around her in a vice-like grip. She screamed in terror as the others desperately tried to free her. Jake grabbed a nearby cob of corn and swung it at the creature, causing it to release Emily. They didn't wait to see if the scarecrow would come after them again. They ran, blindly stumbling through the maze, their hearts pounding and their breaths ragged. The cornfield seemed to stretch on forever, an endless nightmare. As they finally burst through the corn stalks, they found themselves back at the edge of the festival grounds. They were disheveled, their clothes torn, and their faces pale with terror. The festival goers stared in shock as the four friends collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Word of their harrowing experience spread quickly, and soon the entire town was buzzing with fear and curiosity. The local authorities were called in to investigate the scarecrow, but when they arrived at the cornfield, they found nothing but a tattered, lifeless figure. The townsfolk were divided. Some believed the teenager's story, while others dismissed it as a prank gone wrong. But one thing was certain: Millville had been forever changed by that night. Over the years, more and more strange occurrences plagued the town. Crops failed, livestock disappeared, and a deep sense of unease settled over Millville. People began to avoid the cornfields at night, and the once beloved corn festival lost its luster. No one could explain the malevolent force that seemed to have taken root beneath the cornfields, but it was clear that something ancient and evil lurked there. Millville had become a town haunted by its own harvest, and the scarecrows that once stood as guardians had become harbingers of horror. And so, the once thriving town of Millville faded into obscurity, its fields of golden corn now a grim reminder of the darkness that lay beneath. Those who dared to venture near the cornfields at night would hear whispers carried by the wind and glimpse the eerie glow of malevolent eyes. The cornfield horror of Millville had become a legend, a cautionary tale of what can happen when you venture too deep into the heart of darkness, hidden among the rows of endless corn. Story 2. In the heart of the Midwest, where cornfields stretched for miles under the watchful eye of a harvest moon, the town of Briarwood was home to a chilling legend. The townsfolk whispered tales of a haunted cornfield, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. It was the summer of 1978 when three childhood friends, Mike, Jenny, and Mark, decided to put their bravery to the test and explore the infamous cornfield. The rumors about it had always intrigued them, and they saw it as a rite of passage. Under the cover of darkness, they ventured into the field, armed with only flashlights and a sense of adventure. The moon cast an eerie glow over the rows of corn, and the wind carried faint whispers that seemed to beckon them further into the maze. As they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine maze of corn, they began to feel a sense of unease. The corn stalks seemed to grow taller and closer together, creating an oppressive atmosphere that closed in around them. Jenny, always the most cautious of the group, turned to her friends. "Are we sure about this? This place gives me the creeps." Mike, determined to prove his fearlessness, scoffed. "Come on, Jenny. Don't be such a scaredy cat. It's just a cornfield." Mark, the quietest of the trio, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Jenny, we'll be fine." They continued on their journey, pushing deeper into the field. The rustling of the corn leaves and the distant chirping of crickets were their only companions. The further they went, the more the boundaries of time and space seemed to blur, and an unsettling sense of déjà vu settled in their hearts. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon something that sent shivers down their spines. A weathered old scarecrow stood in their path. Its tattered clothing and straw-stuffed limbs gave it a grotesque appearance, and its face was nothing more than a sack with crude stitches for eyes and mouth. Jenny's voice quivered as she whispered, "Look at that thing. It's like something out of a nightmare." Mike, trying to keep up his bravado, approached the scarecrow and poked it with a stick. "It's just a creepy decoration, nothing to be scared of." But as he touched the scarecrow, something unexpected happened. The sack that served as its face slowly turned to face him, and its stitched eyes locked onto his. The scarecrow's mouth twisted into a grimace, and it let out a low, guttural growl that sent chills down their spines. Terrified, the trio turned to flee, but the cornfield had become a nightmarish labyrinth. No matter which direction they ran, they found themselves back in front of the malevolent scarecrow, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in a nightmarish loop. No matter how hard they tried to escape, they always ended up back in front of the haunting scarecrow. Exhausted and terrified, they huddled together, their flashlights flickering. Jenny's voice trembled as she spoke. "We have to figure out how to break this curse, or we'll be stuck here forever." As they desperately brainstormed, Mark recalled an old legend he had heard from his grandmother. She had spoken of a sacred cornfield that was said to hold the power to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. According to the legend, only those who truly believed and respected the spirits of the cornfield would be allowed to leave. With no other option, the trio decided to try a different approach. They stood in front of the scarecrow and began to speak, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the spirits that might reside in the field. "We mean no harm," Mike said, his voice steady. "We respect this place and its history. Please, let us go." Jenny and Mark joined in, expressing their respect and admiration for the cornfield and its secrets. Slowly, the The scarecrow's grimace softened, and its eyes dimmed. It stepped aside, allowing them to pass. With cautious steps, they continued through the cornfield, the oppressive atmosphere gradually lifting. As they emerged from the maze, they found themselves back on the outskirts of Briarwood, safe and sound. The legend of the haunted cornfield lived on in Briarwood, but Mike, Jenny, and Mark knew the truth. It was not a place of malevolent horror, but a realm where the spirits of the past watched over the land. They had passed a test of respect and belief, and in doing so, had earned the right to leave. Years later, the three friends returned to the cornfield, not as curious children, but as adults who understood the importance of preserving the town's history. They tended to the field, maintaining its scarecrows and honoring the spirits that dwelled within. The legend of the haunted cornfield persisted, but it had transformed into a tale of respect and reverence, a reminder that sometimes the boundaries between this world and the next were not as rigid as they seemed. Story 3. In the quiet town of Hollowbrook, nestled amid endless acres of cornfields, there was a tale that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it. It was a story whispered in hushed tones around campfires and told to children to keep them away from the sprawling sea of cornstalks that surrounded the town. The story began many decades ago when a reclusive farmer named Ezra lived on the outskirts of Hollowbrook. Ezra was known for his unusual fascination with the cornfields, which stretched as far as the eye could see. He tended to his crops day and night, rarely seen by the townsfolk. One fateful summer, as the cornfield swayed under the golden sun, a drought plagued Hollowbrook, threatening to wither the crops. Desperation gripped the townspeople, and they turned to Ezra, the recluse with an uncanny ability to make his corn thrive even in the harshest conditions. With reluctance, they sent a group of emissaries to approach Ezra's secluded farmhouse. Their knocks on his door echoed through the stillness of the countryside, until finally the farmer appeared. His eyes were wild, and his clothes were tattered and covered in dirt. The emissaries pleaded with Ezra to share his secrets for a bountiful harvest, for the survival of the town depended on it. After a long silence, Ezra agreed, but only under one condition. They must follow him into his cornfield at night, where he claimed the true source of his harvest power lay hidden. The emissaries hesitated, but their desperation overcame their fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cornfields, they followed Ezra into the maze of maze. Armed with lanterns and trembling hearts, they ventured deeper into the field. The cornstalks towered above them, casting eerie, shifting shadows that played tricks on their senses. The night air was thick with tension as they followed Ezra, their lanterns flickering in the darkness. It was clear that this cornfield was unlike any they had ever seen. It felt alive, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing deep within the field. In the center stood a towering scarecrow, its form grotesque and menacing. Its eyes, made of two shimmering emeralds, seemed to pierce through the souls of those who gazed upon it. Ezra turned to the emissaries, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and dread. "This is the guardian of my harvest," he whispered. "The spirit of the cornfield itself. It demands a sacrifice to ensure a bountiful harvest, and tonight it demands one of you." Terror washed over the emissaries as they realized the true nature of Ezra's pact with the cornfield. They pleaded with him to reconsider, but he was unyielding. In the end, they drew straws, and the unfortunate emissary who drew the shortest straw was led forward by Ezra. As the sacrificial emissary approached the scarecrow, a sinister wind rustled through the cornfield, and the scarecrow's eyes blazed with an unnatural light. With a swift, unnatural motion, the scarecrow's straw-stuffed arms reached out and enveloped the emissary, pulling them into its twisted form. The remaining emissaries fled in terror, racing through the cornfield, their lanterns casting wild shadows as they stumbled blindly through the labyrinth of maze. They could hear the anguished cries of their comrade behind them, but they dared not look back. At last, they burst through the corn stalks and stumbled into the moonlit clearing outside Ezra's farmhouse. They were disheveled, their clothes torn, and their faces ashen. They recounted the horrifying events to the townsfolk, and the legend of the haunted cornfield was born. Ezra was never seen again, and his farmhouse stood abandoned, a grim reminder of the darkness that lurked within the cornfield. The townspeople knew to avoid the field at all costs, and the once thriving town of Hollowbrook began to wither away, its fields barren and its spirit broken. Years passed, and the cornfield remained untouched, a sinister presence lurking on the town's edge. Those who dared to venture near it at night claimed to hear eerie whispers carried on the wind and glimpsed the haunting glow of the scarecrow's emerald eyes. The legend of Hollowbrook's haunted cornfield served as a chilling warning, a reminder that some secrets are better left undiscovered, and some pacts should never be made. The town had paid a terrible price for its desperation, and the malevolent spirit that dwelled within the cornfield continued to hunger for more. The haunting legacy of Hollowbrook's cursed cornfield would endure, a testament to the darkness that could be found even in the most innocent of places.